with us for our third and last presenter, our own Jerry Keucher, who is a priest in the Diocese of Long Island, serving in Brooklyn. And Jerry, as many of you know, has been the author of several books. The one most akin to this topic is one called Remember the Future, which I think was his first book.
Right.
And Jerry has a great deal of background in finance and stewardship, and also serves as a consultant on the Episcopal Church Foundation staff. So Jerry, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chuck, and thank you all across the for being part of this. I intended to lurk this morning and hear Tim and Mary's presentations, but unfortunately I had to spend the morning at the hospital emergency room for a friend. So, but I'm happy to be with you now, and I had seen their presentations. And so I hope that what I'm going to say is going to be helpful, because it's perhaps a way of taking some of the stuff that you heard earlier this morning and thinking about how to apply it concretely to your own efforts to raise money from your constituents, from your members, and to work to form them as stewards. The first thing I think about the first leadership rule about asking people for money is to do it in a way that doesn't make them mad. I will never forget that some years ago, when I spent a lot of time in different parishes in the Diocese of New York talking about proportional giving, I preached at a little parish in northern Dutchess County, and a very sweet lady about my mother's age came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you. That was the first sermon I've ever heard about money that didn't make me mad." And we chatted, and I thought, well, that's very nice. And then as I was driving home, I thought, wow, here's this woman in her 80s who's been in church all her life. She's heard hundreds of sermons about money from lots of different priests, and they have all made her mad. Now, and I think it's one of the reasons that people don't respond to some of the language that we use when we talk to people about money in the church, because we come at it with a sense that you are obligated to support the parish because you're a member. It doesn't matter how well the parish is being led or how transparent we are about the money or whether we're articulating any kind of vision or stuff like that. You ought to be supporting the church because this is the church that you're a member of, and you ought to be supporting it at a level that solves our budget problem. In fact, a priest a couple of years ago, during some of the worst time of the recession, said to our daughter and her husband, who hadn't pledged for the new year, he said, you know, you really ought to pledge because you're members here and you have to support the parish. And if when you make the pledge, you have to keep it up. If you have trouble, you know, run into difficulties, economic difficulties or something, you can come talk to me, but I don't know that it'd do any good because you've made the commitment and you ought to keep it up. And I thought to myself, wow, that guy has put into words what I think a lot of lay and clergy leaders feel, but maybe are a little reluctant to say that openly. I think everything that we use in spoken presentations, written materials, everything has to be scrubbed of any trace of anxiety, all language of obligation. It's mainly the language of obligation that we use that makes our appeals ineffective and that makes people mad. In point of fact, your members are under no obligation to support your parish. They're not. And they're not under any obligation to be there in the first place. So they're there because they want an experience of God. So let's try to do something that gives them an experience of God rather than an expectation that they have to support the parish at a certain financial level. They will do that if properly motivated, properly led, and properly inspired. And of course, I have seen some instances where leaders have asked the parish to do something that it's obvious that they're not doing. Hypocrisy is a very corrosive thing, and we have to be very careful about that. The language of obligation is basically shorthand for the language of desire. When we tell a kid, don't run out in the street, what we mean is, I don't want you to be hurt, and I think you don't want to be hit by a car. And so if you want to get across the street safely, you'll want to look both ways before you cross the street. It takes a little longer to say it, to unpack it, and it's shorter and easier to use imperatives and shoulds and musts and can'ts and ought tos. But I think as leaders of a voluntary association like a church, I think we have to do the work of unpacking any kind of re-saying anything that we start to write or say that uses any kind of obligation, and try to think, how can I say this in a way that would make people want to do it? Because people want to be here. They want the parish to thrive. They want it to be well led. They want it to do well. So how do we say what we want to say in the language of desire that meets the real spiritual aspirations of the people who are in our pews? There are two parts to raising money in the church. One is the direct part of what I call institutional fundraising, which means even if all your members were tithers, the parish would still have to do the work that every not-for-profit organization has to do to make the case to the membership that part of their tithe ought to go, or can go to the church. They'd like it to go to the church to do what the work of the church. So stewardship formation is a very different thing. It's having people come to understand themselves not as owners of what they have, but as trustees of gifts that were given to them by God for which they will render an account. When we try to do both things at the annual pledge drive, I think we often cause confusion, and at this point, the word stewardship has become so debased that I will always, when I'm talking about your annual pledge drive, I will say your pledge drive. I won't say your stewardship drive, because I think most people, because we've asked badly, most people now understand stewardship not to mean thinking of myself as a recipient of God's gifts, but as being the object of very bad fundraising techniques. So I would encourage you during your annual pledge drives to concentrate on doing a very good job of making the case for why people might want to support the parish and what could happen with how the vision could be implemented if it receives their support. Stewardship formation can happen in lots of different ways and lots of different venues. And I think that's kind of the thing I would like to talk about year-round, not so much the raising of money. It's necessary to do both stewardship formation and institutional fundraising. I don't think it really works to try to do them both at the same time. And however you do it, it can't have any whiff of this is something that you must do, or this is an expectation, or what I call passive-aggressive obligation, which is God is calling us to do something or other. God may be calling us to do all kinds of things, but God may not be calling the people to respond to the leadership's ineffective fundraising techniques. So we're going to talk first about institutional fundraising. Nobody is obligated to do anything, and everybody has to do the work of asking for the money in a way that motivates people to support the church. And we can't take people for granted, which we often do. Think about it. I mean, does somebody, after the pledge drive, does somebody send a letter out to those that responded thanking them for making a pledge? There may be an announcement from the pulpit, but take a lesson from any well-run not-for-profit and pay attention to, and don't take your members for granted, and say thank you frequently for what they do. It'll not only make them feel better, but it'll make you a better leader to be responsive to the membership. I mean, one of the things, I understand that every parish has problems. I'm not aware of a parish that doesn't think it has some kind of problem. Too often, leaders begin to think of the members, or at least some of the members, as part of the problem. I think it's very important for us to remember that the people, even the difficult people, are the potential solution to the problem. They're not the problem. And what causes parishes to stumble and skid and fail, in my observation and experience, is generally a leadership problem, not a people problem. Poor leadership allows a bad system to develop where people get very, argumentative and fight with each other and stuff like that. But as when good leadership comes in, can make some building improvements, ease the operating budget a little bit, start to outline a vision for the parish of how it can get to a healthy, sustainable state. In other words, as the system starts to get healthier, most of the people in the system will start to get healthier. And so if there's a people problem, think first not about them being the problem, but about any weaknesses that there might be in the leadership that might be addressed, that will indirectly address the people problem. So as far as I can see, any way that we ask for money falls into one of these 5 categories. We'll start with the least effective. My apologies to those of you that have heard this before. I think there might be a few of you, but maybe it's a gospel that's worth preaching more than once. The sky is falling is, of course, one that's used frequently when the leadership is anxious. It says things are terrible, and the only way you have to raise the amount of money that you give in order to address the terrible situation that we have. Well, if the sky is actually falling, if there's been a catastrophe, a fire, Superstorm Sandy, some other really bad thing, then okay, then it's appropriate to say this terrible thing has happened and we have to address it, for the continued survival of the parish. But most of the time, when this kind of language creeps into the annual appeal, the sky isn't actually falling. I mean, things may not be everything that people would want them to be, but the sky is not falling. And people, as we learned after 9/11 with the color coding of the alerts, people cannot stay on high alert for very long. You just can't. Normal life starts to take over. And so if the sky is always falling, well, people learn how to walk around the pieces of the sky that had fallen and live their normal lives. Reserve any kind of disastrous appeal for an actual disaster. Most of the time, the sky is falling is motivated or comes out of the deep level of anxiety that the leadership has about the future of the parish. I believe anxiety is the opposite of leadership, and you can't lead if you are projecting anxiety. You may be anxious inside, but that's not the way to talk about it. I've consulted with vestries, typically ones that are overspending their endowment and have reached the last couple of years of being able to have anything at all. And they're like, well, the people don't understand how serious the situation is. We have to take it to them. And I say, what are you going to take to them? Are you going to take just a problem to them? The leadership's function is to recognize the problem and to say, here's a possible way out. You can't just go to people. If you found the problem insoluble, so will people who have not been on the vestry, who have not been exposed to the numbers, and who don't know as much as you do about the situation. It's leadership's job to come up with a possible way out, at least one. Maybe you can come up with a couple of different ideas. But whenever people are saying the sky is falling, unless the sky has actually fallen, it's generally bad leadership, anxious leadership, and leadership that's not going to motivate people to give. People will respond to a true crisis. People will not respond to a crisis every year. We become like a rug store that's been running a going out of business sale for the last 10 years and yet somehow is not going out of business. So basically the sky is falling is ineffective and also usually untrue. This is the one that we typically use. This is what most parishes use, and this is why people equate the word stewardship with bad fundraising techniques. We talk about the money that we need to raise in order to pay the bills. We've got an insurance bill, we've got these things to do, we got those things to do. People don't give to pay bills. People give to see something happen. They want the results of what the bills pay for. We'll get to that in a minute. But as long as you concentrate on the budget and the bills, it'll be surprisingly demotivating. And this is the one where all of the language of obligation comes in. We have a budget gap. Everybody needs to raise their pledge by 10%, or any kind of quota or fair share. In other words, we turn, by language like that, we turn the experience of giving part of what we have to God into the experience of paying a bill. And it's in parishes that use this fundraising approach, people will talk about paying their dues because that's how it's been presented to them. And so if that is ringing any bells, then you'll want to stay clear of this kind of budget-based fundraising so that you can motivate information about the budget and about the finances. But we don't need to do it by posting the whole budget on the wall, or do that. Put the financial report in the coffee hour room. Nobody will go look at it, but everybody will know that they could go look at it if they wanted to, and that'll make people feel better. But give a little monthly synopsis in the bulletin. Plate and pledge last month, other operating income last month, total operating income, operating expenses last month, and then surplus or deficit. Just repeat that every month without calling attention to it. Some months there'll be a surplus. Some months there'll be a deficit. We all know what the cash flow cycle of the year is. But that's a way of reporting, giving people the kind of information that they can digest in a digestible way. But do not use the budget as the basis for your fundraising appeal. Team spirit is the thing that says we're a great bunch of people. We love this place. We love each other. We can make this happen. We're a great raw team. I was never much into sports in high school, and we would go to these pep rallies the day of the big games, and they would try to whomp up the team spirit. And I was always I liked my high school okay and stuff like that, but nobody explained. There's no content to team spirit. Nobody's telling you why this game is important or why you might want to feel invested in the outcome. So most of the time, our pledge appeals consist of a lot of talk about how much money we have to pay for insurance and other expenses, and we're a great place and we love this place, and that's why everybody's going to respond by raising their pledge by 10%. And then we wonder why that hasn't happened. And it's not because the people are faithless. It's because St. James might have been talking about pledge campaigns when he says, you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. So it's our job to ask rightly in a way that will motivate people to give. This is the one that is the most effective institutional fundraising pitch. This is what public radio and public TV use. You know, the pitch comes in two parts. The first part is you like the programs that we put on because you watch them or you listen to them, and we know you because you're even listening or watching this. In order for us to continue to do those programs, this is what your money makes possible. If you pledge now, it's like you're supporting Masterpiece Theater or whatever other show is on. In other words, the pitch relates the money that people give to the programs that the station is able to put on. They talk a little bit, about how much they have to pay NPR or something like that for All Things Considered and stuff like that. But in general, it's not a budget-based approach. It's a program-based approach. Your dollars make this possible. That's during the pledge drive. And then before every program that's broadcast, there is a notice that says that the program is made possible in part from contributions from viewers like you. Thank you. So every day there is that connection made between the money that people have given to support the station and the programs that people are watching right now that have been made possible through those contributions. Of course, those contributions have paid for salaries and insurance and rent and lease payments and every other kind of operating expense that's in our budget. But that's not the motivator to give. People are giving to the program, not to the budget. Of course, paying the bills is what allows the programs to happen, but the way and the leadership needs to review the finances. People want to know what has been able to be done. What have we been able to do? People will always say, well, in this parish, people don't support the operating budget, but if you mount a special appeal, they will respond. Again, this is not because they are faithless or uninformed or something like that. It's because when there's a special appeal, they understand what the money is going to go for. And too often in parishes, the operating budget is kind of a black hole that nobody understands because they don't see copies of the financial reports. They don't get any, there's nothing that tells them that makes the direct connection between the money that they're giving and the ministries and programs that the parish is able to operate. So a very simple exercise is to prepare with your annual pledge drive just a little trifold brochure that lists everything that you do. And even in small places that maybe aren't as thriving as people would like them to be, when you think about it, there's still a very long list of things that happen, the altar guild, the ushers, the Sunday school, the office volunteers, all the things that go on that people are doing together, and then to talk about the things that you'd like to have happen in the next year that maybe is based on some indication that those are also things that the people would like to have. But the main thing is connect the money to the mission, connect the money to the program, connect the money to the result instead of to the bill. This will force you to change your thinking, and that'll be good, and it'll change the way you ask, and that'll probably be good. The most effective way that people support an institution is because there has been a vision articulated about what the institution can become with people's support, and especially in churches, what they can become, what the members can become through their participation in that institution. Every parish has programs and ministries that go on. Not that many parishes have an actual vision for the future. How are we going to do this in a way that where we pass on to our successors a stronger institution than we inherited? How are we going to do this in a way that makes this parish more of what we want? We don't spend a lot of time or effort in most places being intentional about that kind of stuff. If it's possible to articulate a vision and that it's one that people buy into, then that'll be the most effective kind of, that'll be the year when the pledge income takes a nice jump. Now, so that's the part that I wanted to say about institutional fundraising. The part that I want to say about stewardship formation is, of course, helping people understand themselves as stewards of God's gifts, not of owners of things that they produce themselves. And St. Paul gets at it when he says, what do you have that you did not receive? And if you received it, in other words, if somebody gave it to you, why do you boast as if it were not a gift? Here, this may seem like a jump, but it's not. In my experience and my observation, when it comes to money, there is nothing that transforms people into stewards, feeling like stewards, more than proportional giving off the top. Giving a percentage of what you've received off the top before you turn to pay your bills. Most of the time, people give so many dollars a month or so many dollars a week. Where did that number come from? Well, I don't know. I can't remember where the number came from that I put on a pledge card before I started to tithe as an adult. But it comes somehow from maybe an aspiration to be generous, but mostly it comes from the same kind of thing that causes us to choose the cell phone plan that we have. It's something that we think fits our needs and that we can afford, and when the bill rolls around, we'll be able to pay it. And so when we sit down to deal with our money, we look at all the things that we have to pay, including the pledge to the church. We add it all up, and we see if we have enough money to meet our obligations. Proportional giving it changes that pattern, and that's what I think is crucial. It makes the first thing that you do, if you're a proportional giver, whether you're tithing or giving 2 or 3%, and I think any percent is an okay place to start. When you give proportionally, the first thing that you do is look back and see what God has given you since the last time you sat down to deal with your money. You add that up, and you multiply it by the percentage that you're giving, and you make that thank offering to God. Then you look at your bills. See, we are body selves. The things that we do with our bodies, the habits that we have with our bodies, they're the things that form us. So this is transformational because it is a different experience. It's a different way completely of doing it. And so it almost immediately, in my experience, it turns your head around because you have done it in a way that turns what we give to God back into a gift. It's no longer an obligation that we've undertaken. It's a gift that we're making in response to the gifts that God made. Is that, I just think there is no substitute for this. Of course, stewardship, formation, all that we have is a gift, including all of the abilities and skills that we have and all of the time that we have, all of that. But when it comes to money, it's proportional giving off the top that will help move people faster than you might imagine to understanding themselves as stewards, not as owners, because they're not. Now, I'm not sure. One of the difficulties that as a presenter that I have in a situation like that is that I can't see your reactions, and I'm not able to read your body language and hear the things that are being gasped or muttered or something like that. But I've been in plenty of situations where I've talked about this. Talking to one vestry of a parish in Long Island, a woman kept saying, "I don't understand what you mean. I don't understand what you mean. What are you talking about off the top?" And I understand the percentage thing, but what do you mean by off the top? And I kept saying, well, the first thing that you do, after you look back and see what God has given you, what's gone into the bank, then you make your percentage gift. And all of a sudden the light dawns, and she says with some real anger in her voice, "Do you mean to tell me that you are suggesting that I give money to the church before I've taken care of my family?" And I said, "Yes, that's precisely what I'm suggesting. And I think that you'll be able to take care of your family just fine, and you might feel a lot less anxious about it if you change the pattern of your giving." So any percentage will do this, in my experience. There's some experiences related in some of the books that I've written that of course I encourage you to look at. It's so important to change the pattern, to turn our gifts to God back into gifts and not bills. And so what we give God depends on what God has given us. And even though 10%, there have been repeated General Convention resolutions recognizing the tithe as the minimal standard of giving in the Episcopal Church. In other words, you're obligated to do it. It's not surprising that people have not been flocking to tithe. Talk about it in terms of people who practice proportional giving. Get them to say what it's meant to them. And I think that you'll find that people who are practicing proportional giving off the top have a completely different attitude about their money. They understand that this is the thing that they want to do, and that it has changed their understanding of who gave them the money in the first place and where the money comes from and what the money can do. It's a change, I think, that cannot be faked, and we can't get to it as long as we're thinking of our gifts, our pledge, as so many dollars a week or so many dollars a month, completely divorced from how much money we're actually getting in. So there are different ways of getting people to share their experiences. One program that a number of people are using is New Consecration Sunday, which does some of it encourages us to do some of the things that I've been talking about. It's no gimmicks. It causes people to think about what God might want them to do, what they might want to do in order to get their hearts closer to God. All of the kinds of things that you normally do. Another reason that our typical pledge drives are basically ineffective is the most effective way of asking people for money is for one committed person to ask in person another committed person to join them in supporting an institution that they both love. Everything that we do that makes it less personal than that encounter is going to be less effective. I don't think it's an accident or a coincidence that every parish did an every member canvass. I mean, in my experience, every parish up to the 60s did an every member canvass every year. Everybody knew it was going to happen. It was part of the normal way of doing things. And about the time that the big decline started in the mainline churches stopped doing every member canvases and started doing less effective ways of asking people for money, which of course led to more disappointing results. So when one of the things that I do now is to run capital campaigns for the Episcopal Church Foundation, and the capital campaigns generally do involve an every member canvas. Callers speak individually at people's homes or at some neutral location in a personal conversation about their relationship with the parish and their support of the capital funds drive. And I encourage places, if it hasn't been that much trouble to organize these calls for the capital campaign, think about continuing to do that as part of your annual pledge drive. Everything that you do that makes it more effective, more personal, everything you do that makes it more personal is going to make it more effective. The least effective way of asking people for money is a mailing, which is what 98% of our parishes do. So if small group meetings, I'm not quite sure I agree with what I've said here, that the every member canvas has seen its day. Most parishes don't do it, but I think, again, that's a true statement about where we are, but it's not necessarily a true statement about where we have to be. The letter writing is, the letter with the pledge card accompanied by one sermon that says this is the time we have to talk about money is going to be, of course, the least effective way of doing it. There are let's talk just a little bit about the year-round aspects of this. You're certainly not going to be asking people for money year-round. I mean, you don't want to be doing those special appeals all the time. The part that you do year-round is to report regularly to people on the finances of the parish in ways that they can digest, in giving them the information that they need in order to have a basic understanding of the parish's situation. You continually want to make the connection between what people have given and what that enables the parish to do. There's a book called 1 Minute Stewardship Sermons. The idea, you don't need to buy the book. I mean, you can, but you get this guy takes 30 seconds, or 45 seconds at the announcements every week to highlight some aspect of parish life: the junior choir, the altar guild, the office volunteers, or something like that, and ends up thanking them, but also saying your gifts to your pledges and your contributions to the operating budget are what makes this possible. We're able to do it because of your gift. Thank you. That encourages people to understand that their gifts are not paying bills. Their gifts are making ministry possible, and they're making mission possible, and they're making programs possible. And that's the way of doing institutional fundraising all year long. The way of doing stewardship formation all year round, which you wouldn't necessarily do in the same conversation, is to commend proportional giving off the top at every step of the way, assuming, of course, that that's the pattern of giving that you follow. If you do not give proportionally off the top, then please do not encourage anybody else to do that, or tell anybody else that they ought to be tithing or whatever. You try giving proportionally off the top for a while at some percentage that is not going to pose a terrible burden to you. Go through the experience of giving a gift to God, that is, seeing what God has given you and responding to God with a proportional gift from those gifts, and then turn to your obligations and see what kind of effect it has on you. My prediction is that the effect that it'll have on you is it'll change your head about your money and it'll also make you a lot less fearful of commending proportional giving off the top to other people. There's a little parish in northern Manhattan where I've got a few minutes, where I was invited to speak about proportional giving, and the priest, I was working on the diocesan staff at the time, and the priest made the mistake of saying that she hoped everybody would be in church next Sunday because a man from the diocese was going to come talk about money. And she was terrifically embarrassed the next week when the attendance at the service was about half of what it normally was. But I think they realized that I was not going to talk about money in the way that people might have feared, and so she had me come back 6 weeks later. As a result of her good leadership and perhaps some of the stuff that I said, 21 of their 42 pledging units switched to proportional giving off the top. The priest was tithing, the senior warden was giving 5%, and everybody else was giving some lesser percent. One guy figured out that what he was giving, and so many dollars a week, came out to 1.73%, and he adopted 1.73% as the percentage that he was going to give off the top. In February or March of the next year, the priest invited all the people to get together to talk about the experience and invited me to come. 16 of the 21 people came, and here's everybody. Nobody's been practicing proportional giving off the top for more than 2 or 3 months. Every single person had something to say about how the experience of giving proportionally off the top had drawn them closer to God, made them feel closer to the church, or had changed the priorities about how they wanted to spend the rest of the money. In other words, it's transformational. It is transformational. If you're not practicing proportional giving off the top, if you've taken, you've used one of those tables that's in the that often goes with the pledge drive that says if you make $40,000 a year and you're giving 5%, that's $40 a week, and you've translated it back into so many dollars a week. Well, you've turned it back into the experience of paying a bill, and I'll bet it didn't have a transformative effect on you. Change the pattern and see what happens. And then use all the money that you that you feel all freed up from to buy my books. I feel I can flog them mercilessly because at least the first 2, I assigned the royalties to the Diocese of New York, so I don't make any money off of them. So I encourage you to read them. The last one, if you're in a turnaround situation, if your parish needs to be turned around, I suggest that you look at Back from the Dead, the Book of Congregational Growth. Chuck is on the screen, which means that my time is up. So, Chuck.
Well, Jerry, I have seen 3 or 4 questions here. The first one from Haddonfield says, "Can't we state our giving to God as a budget item instead of impulse giving, and not use the phrase paying a bill?"
Well, okay. You can, if people are giving so many dollars a week, it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's going to feel like a bill because it's just exactly like the experience everybody has every time they sit down to pay bills. So it doesn't. You're not going to make it something different by calling it something different. The only way to make it different is to change the pattern. Stop giving by the week. Start giving a percentage off the top and see what happens. So as long as you're not addressing the basic problem, which is that we've turned this experience into the experience of paying a bill, as long as we're not addressing that, I don't think it really matters what we call it. If I understood the question right, and it's not an it's not an impulse in the sense of, picking up that candy bar, by the checkout counter. That's where all the impulse purchases go. I think people do think about this, and I think people want their hearts to be with God. Proportional giving off the top is a way of moving their hearts closer to God. It's not an obligation. It's the biggest step I ever took on my spiritual journey. It's by far the most important spiritual discipline I have is tithing. Tithing.
Question from Newark. It seems like
the Diocese of let me look at this thing for the Virgin Islands, because I've served only really in New York. I've served only West Indian parishes, and I know that in the language that a lot of islanders use is to use the word tithe to describe any gift that you give. I'm using tithing to describe proportional giving off the top. You do not give weekly unless you get paid weekly. Most of us get our money every other week or twice a month or once a month. That's when you give. And it's the proportional gift, a percentage of what God has given you. So this is really a thing about precision. That's why don't use the word tithing. Use proportional giving off the top. Because in some cultures, tithing has come to mean the $5 a week that I put in the envelope. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
Well, the next one is a good one, too, from Newark. It seems like you're equating giving to God as giving to the church, and that doesn't seem to be true.
Look, if you give proportionally, if you switch to proportional giving off the top, and you don't want your whole proportional gift to go to the church, then you have the fun every time you sit down of figuring out where the rest of your proportional gift is going to go. I think that's perfectly okay. As I say, even if everybody were tithing, I'm not assuming that 100% of everybody's 10% off the top would go to their local parish. It does, mine does, because, that's the job I got. And I give gifts on top of that. But my mother didn't do it that way, and she had a lot of fun, responding to all different kinds of places, to the point where 2 years after she's died, she still gets more mail than anybody at this house. So it's the proportional giving. It's the pattern. It's the pattern that matters.
Tonawanda.
I see that. I think that's okay. Look, here's the trouble with, at least that I've seen, with pledge cards that ask people to indicate, some part of parish life that they'd like to be part of, or some other thing, when you're asking for time and talent as well as treasure. That never gets followed up on. You haven't created a system where somebody is going through those and trying to hook that person up to that area of parish life. Only ask for those things if you have already created the system that will allow that hookup to happen. In other words, it's even more destructive, I think, to say this pledging isn't only about money, it's about your time and talent, and then you have people fill out this form, nobody ever gets back to them about it. What does that mean it was really about? It was only about the money. That was the only thing you sort of got back to people on. So I agree but I think that people who give proportionally off the top are likely to be pretty generous with their time and their abilities as well. It's a thing that creates generosity and creates the idea, gives people the real personal knowledge that they can be as generous as they want to be. Most people want to be more generous than they feel they can be. Changing the pattern of how you give unlocks that and makes it different and makes people see that they can be more generous than they thought they could be.
I see a question is coming in from New Providence. Oh, there it is.
Oh, right. Okay, good. This everybody sees this.
Now, I'd like to repeat the question.
That you give by direct debit to your checking account. There are a couple of services that will do this. What's it? Parish Pay, I think it's called. For 1%, they'll process it. When I was at the diocesan office and the finance office, we set up an e-pledging system, and parishioners could have the diocesan office debit their account for the amount they wanted to give and credit it to the parish's account. And this precise question came up. And what one parish did, that had a lot of IBMers and a lot of people that wanted to do it this way, they put laminated cards in the back of the church that said, "I give by e-pledge." The person put that card in the offering plate as it passed by, and the ushers took them out of the offering plates and stacked them all up in the back of the church again. What is the offering that God wants from us? It's not the bread and the wine and the money are signs of the offering that God wants from us, which is the offering of ourselves, our souls, and bodies. So money is a sign of that offering, and I think it looks good for people who give. If you only, no matter how you give, if you get your money once a month and you give once a month, put an empty envelope in the plate the other weeks. It looks bad to have regular contributors not taking part in the offering ritual, but what we put in the plate is only a sign, a very important sign, but it is a sign of the real offering that God wants, which is us, the pure offering. That's right. I order all the checks. I order all my checks through my bank software, and so the checks arrive at the parish in the mail. I don't. Of course, I'm celebrating, so they don't normally expect they don't usually pass the plate to the priest, but my gifts are there, and if you, however people give, put in, and there are different ways of doing it. Use the laminated cards, use an empty envelope, take part in the ritual, because that has become common in the church since the middle of the 19th century. There was no ushers or plates or anything for all the centuries before that. But this is the way, that the thing that happens every Sunday in every church, and we should be taking part in it, but it is a sign of the real offering that God wants. And I think proportional giving off the top helps us get to something like that real offering. Oh, and the program that we set up at the diocesan office was also free with the parish's assessment. Are there other questions?
Are there any other questions that can be generated from the audience? Jerry, do you have any wrap-up thoughts that you'd like to present?
Well, I knew that I was under some time pressure, so I did, a somewhat compressed version. I just hope that it wasn't like I was lapsing into Sanskrit. Okay. I mean, maybe this was just such a fertile field that all the seeds have been planted and watered, and we'll see what kind of growth God gives.
Here comes something from New Providence and Virgin Islands. We may have another question, maybe another thanks. Yeah.
Oh, well. Okay.
There are thank yous.
Well, that's nice. See, it's nice to say thank you. Say thank you to your people more often.
let me say thank you, Jerry, for your input and your support throughout this process. For those who are unaware of it, Jerry has been part of the committee that put this together from the very beginning, and we applaud him for his efforts there as well as his efforts today.